Hi, everyone. I'm Kathryn Rose, founder and CEO of channelWise. channelWise is a platform that provides channel partners access to vetted, been there, done that experts for one-on-one video consultations that help them go farther, faster in their business. Today, we have with us channelWise expert and co-founder and CEO of Lifecycle Insights, a customer success platform for MSPs. With her default setting locked on smiles, she aims to create raving fans for Lifecycle Insights and help MSPs do the same for their customers. Thanks so much for joining us today, Marnie Stockman.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So nice to see you. And it's funny because we talk a lot about the folks' journeys into the channel. And I know you have a little bit of an unusual one. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started out with the toughest customers at all toughest customers of all as a high school math teacher. So folks always say, I feel like when folks are hearing me talk and they'll think like, why am I going to talk to a former high school math teacher about business? To which I say I'm good at sales because I sold pre-calculus to 16-year-olds, right? And to do that, there's only one way. You have to make it about the 16-year-old, not about the math. And in business, I would say for managed service providers, when they're doing business reviews, having any conversations, any sales chats with their prospects or clients, they've got to make it about their client's business, not about the technology or their own business. So that sort of that was the jumping off point. I ended up in ed tech by way of education and ran customer success for a company that got acquired. So we went from 60 employees to 150 to 450 to 1,500. Mm-hmm. So you learn to scale processes, products, and strategies, right? When you need to scale customer success at that rate. So we're pretty passionate about customer success. As a matter of fact, we don't have salespeople. We have customer success folks. And that led me to the developers and I kind of wanted to start our own company. So we were looking for a problem to solve. And I had played volleyball with an MSP. And when I asked him if he had any problems to solve, business reviews was top of mind.
Got it. Well, I mean, that's always the best story too, especially, female founders, right? We're always looking for problems to solve, but then if we can take them and turn them into a business, that's where the magic happens. So, when you said in your bio that you have your default setting locked on smiles, right? And I can, of course, attest to that since I've only ever seen you smile and be gracious and helpful, which is one of the reasons people gravitate toward you and why you were invited to be an expert on channelWise. But how can MSPs use that philosophy to enhance or strengthen their relationship with their customers?
Well, I think it is all about having a human first approach as opposed to a tech first approach. So I can see it in a lot of ways. I mentioned we don't have a sales team and our number one core value is raving fans. So it starts with if you come in with a support ticket, and this is true for MSPs too. So many times, if you're sending in a support ticket, unless you're entering an enhancement request, which we also get all day long, right? You're coming in hot because there's a problem. But what they don't need back is response with the same level of angst, right? They need human compassion and a quick, we want to solve your problem and we'll get this taken care of for you with a chipper smile and aiming to make their day better. So I think that's really important when you're solving problems for people all day long, because that is what managed service providers really do. As a matter of fact, we keep, when we get replies back from our support team, which gets rave reviews, like, holy cow, I wish everybody else would do it this way. Mm-hmm. We tag them with raves so that we can share with the company. Because a lot of times the tier one support doesn't get a lot of props, right? They're getting their ticket every day. And so we share with the company, like, this is what people are saying about our tier one folks in support and our development. And we feel like that's really important. So I think that's part of it. The other piece is if folks, so we talk customer success, right? And as a math teacher, I'll give you my favorite equation. Customer success equals CX plus CO, customer experience plus customer outcomes. So I mentioned the whole selling pre-calculus to 16-year-olds. You better make it about the kids and not about the math. So you better make it about the business, not about the technology. But the other piece is, what's the experience like to work with you, right? They always say people remember how you made them feel, not about what you said. So coming in with smiles is always helpful.
You're 100% right? I mean, of course, you have Chick-fil-A out there, and then if anyone out there who's listening that's from like the Northeast and the New York and Connecticut area, we have Stu Leonard's, and their whole thing, Stu Leonard's philosophy is like, the customer's always right, rule number one, and then it's like rule number two, refer back to rule number one. You know what I mean? And I do know how challenging it is to, in this world of phone trees, even though it is so super frustrating for the customer to do that, it's hard, right, to scale that customer experience. But you're right, like it's so important. You almost have to do that first, right? You really have to make sure that you are serving your customers and meeting them where they are.
Well, and the first step is so there's a maturity model for process, right? And you start with undefined, like, I don't know, I'm just solving problems, right? Which is frankly how almost every managed service provider started their business. They were just solving problems for people. And then all of a sudden they were solving enough, they could quit their day job and just solve problems for people, right? But then you need to start saying, okay, I'm seeing a pattern. And it becomes a manual process. So you've defined the process, even though it's manual. Then once it moves from manual into digital, we're starting to see some advantages, right? It's stored in one place, things aren't getting lost, et cetera. But here's something that a lot of managed service providers don't do, and that's make the jump from digital to automated, which is interesting because you think about, well, of course they do. They're doing technology. That's all automation. But
Right.
when they start looking at the spreadsheets that they're using, spreadsheets are digital capture of numbers, information, data. It's not automation. So that's why so many tools out there help bridge that gap, because that's when you can really speed up your business, et cetera. And it's really transformative. So for sure, you start with an undefined process, but you have to look for the patterns and the places where you can make, pleasant interactions, even if they are automated along the way.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, and I know your platform focuses on in that, the comment that you just made segues nicely into this, but focuses mainly on these ideas of business reviews. And I know, there's been a lot of talk over the years about them, but, why are you so focused on these, being very upfront and center with your customers on doing these business reviews? And what are the importance of these for MSPs and their customers?
Well, you're very right that folks have been talking about it. I always say QBRs are like the weather. Everybody was talking about it. Nobody was doing anything about it. And then we decided to do something about it. So really, the relationship with your client is based on those conversations you're having with them. And those conversations need to have at a proper cadence and be a business review. It's not about a touch point call, just like, hey, Kathryn, how's your daughter today? That's not a business review. Business reviews have been around a long time in the enterprise world, in the world of consulting, but managed service providers came to business reviews a different way. So the whole realm of customer success is really a young organization, department, division role in the managed services world. And so managed service providers came to business reviews by way of everybody jumping to remote monitoring. So when we had the economic crisis and everybody needed to pay less for more, folks started saying, well, I'm going to bundle all of what I do, right? I'm not going to have to roll a truck on site because I'm going to be able to remotely monitor your devices. They started losing contact and the relationship with their customer.
Got it.
So they then felt like, okay, they were told by industry experts, even, you need to get a hold of your customer and let them know what they're doing for you. You often heard, everything's working, why am I paying you? Or nothing's working, why am I paying you, right? So it started back in the day when the MSPs were truly patching the computer for them, updating, like manually grabbing spam emails virtually is what it felt like. But that has matured. And as I say to folks all the time, it's 2023. My computer wakes up in the morning, tells me it patched itself, asks me if, this is spam, and lets me know it blocks 7 viruses. So if I've got a human wanting to meet with me to tell me that they did that, I'm questioning it. So the maturity of the business review itself needs to be much more strategic and less tactical. And that's really where you're engaging the client in the value you bring to them. So that's why it's really mission critical for managed service providers to offer business reviews to their clients, and even more critical that they say the right things to their clients.
So it's moving from like, this is, the laundry list of things that we've done for you, to a much more in-depth strategic decision.
Yeah,
Do
much
you,
more
discussion, I mean, and do you usually recommend that they do these business reviews with all of their clients, no matter how small they are?
So it's interesting. We talk about segmenting your clients all the time. So yes, they're called quarterly business reviews. I always say I'll stop calling them that when people stop Googling that. But the important part is everybody gets the cadence of business review that they deserve. So
Okay.
one of the things that we work with people to do, and again, this is something I've consulted with companies outside the managed service space to define their process for this. How are we going to segment our clients to decide what's the proper cadence for them? So we typically look at the value, so MRR or MRR per seat, and effort, right? How much time and attention is this company going to need? You'll quickly start segmenting the clients and say like, okay, high value, high effort clients, we need to meet with them monthly or quarterly. If you can think of a client that's more than 10% of your total revenue, how often do you want to meet with them? Because if they drop, you're in trouble, right?
Yeah, you better be in there. Exactly.
Yeah, you better be meeting with them. And then you've got your high value, low effort. They're probably your favorite clients. You're thinking, well, they're low effort and they're our happiest clients. Why would we want to meet with them? To which I say, go get a referral, right? Like, how do we find more folks like this? Then you've got low value, low effort, and people often look like, why are we keeping those as clients? But you probably have quite a few of those, and they're kind of like plug and play. Like, these are easy to support because they just follow all of our best practices. Use the magic of automation to remarket and rehab conversations to them. But then once a year, right, they do deserve some type of human interaction, probably over Teams or Zoom or whatever, because folks are now accustomed to that. And then in doing this strategy, you look at your high effort, low value clients. If you've read the book Pumpkin Plan, you already know what to do with them, but you either need to renegotiate with them, need to get them off of whatever software technology is causing them pain, or fire them. So I don't think everybody needs a business review quarterly. If everybody was paying you $300 a seat, then yeah, they probably do. But you probably have some folks that aren't even paying you enough to really warrant that. So they should get the cadence they deserve, not the same cadence for everybody.
Well, and where do you really recommend folks start with that? Because I mean, you mentioned the low effort, clients or whatever. I often find that those are the biggest gold mine, because no one has been paying attention to them, because they're the ones that just keep on paying, and you don't really have to pay attention to them. They don't bother you, right? But when you go sit down with them, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I didn't know you were in the process of being acquired, right? And there's an business opportunity. Or, oh, you're thinking about opening more offices, Mr. Doctor or whatever. Oh, you're joined a big practice. Well, now, in one, it's an opportunity, right, to grow, but it's also an opportunity to make sure you cover, your tail and make sure that they don't go anywhere.
And that's one of the things we look toward, is tracking customer health and really seeing all of those characteristics that you just defined are what we say you should keep track of. Because if they're about to be acquired, the new boss is probably coming in with their favorite managed service provider, right? So you need to be ahead of that. So I agree that group is a gold mine, because they're the ones that have the most growth potential, right? So I would look at your verticals down there. What of those verticals are performing right now? When COVID hit, we knew restaurants were in trouble, right? But there were other industries that were really scaling up. So if folks had really kept an eye and said, what types of industries are down here in this group? Who can I really support? Because they're going to move the needle for me, and who maybe can get some automated support because they're going to struggle, and maybe I can give them some help that doesn't require a lot of hand-holding. And oddly enough, the other place is really those clients that are high effort and low value. They are probably dragging down your company morale. Yeah. So if you think about, I do this activity all of the time in peer groups. And I'll say, okay, in that top left quadrant, you don't have to write down their actual name, just write down their initials so you know who they are. But think about the client that, like, you eye roll when any one of your team members picks up the phone from them. There's dread. Who is that? What would happen if either they started paying you more so you felt better about it, you fixed the root cause, or they were no longer your client, what would happen to customer, your own employee morale, right? And so it's interesting that getting some of those sticky widgets moving or out of the company really do help.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been in sales for 25 years, and I can attest to the fact that, when you cut loose those people who don't make you feel good, right? You're never going to please them. Let them be someone else's problem, because it's not you, right? They'll treat every other person that they work with the same exact way.
Yeah.
And you can focus your effort and attention on ones that will be good for your company long term. Besides the obvious of man hours, so to speak, or human resource hours, to dedicate to this, what are other challenges you've seen with these business reviews, and how can MSPs overcome them? And of course, if time is one of their biggest challenges, you talk to that too.
Yeah. So time being one of the biggest challenges, that's why Lifecycle Insights exists. So like, I'm not here to do a sales pitch on the platform, but do something to automate what you've got, right? If you have an undefined process right now, let's start with defining the process so you can repeat it. Once you can repeat it, a lot of folks do the process in spreadsheets, and there are other tools, including ours, that can help you automate it. So by golly, if you are doing manual lookups and you are creating a budget by hand in an Excel spreadsheet, you should look at a way to make that happen faster. But that is it. When we ask MSPs what their biggest problem is, they will say the prep time takes a long time. But for the folks that are really trying to drive business reviews, when we ask them what their biggest problem is, they will often say getting people to come to the table for them. And the reason is, in a shocking
and that's another good point. If you can't get your client to come to the table to talk to you about the health of their business, that's a red flag.
At 100%. That is one that we track along the way. Like if they're not showing up, that is part of the problem. But half the time they're not showing up because the last time you did a business review, it wasn't strategic, right?
Right.
So I said at the beginning, kids came to pre-calc class. Well, first they're forced to come to pre-calc class, but they didn't have me kicking them out of pre-calc class because I got them engaged, right? So it's about customer engagement, and it's about making it about their business, not about your technology. So of course, a risk assessment goes along with that, but there's more than just the risk assessment, because security and scaring people around ransomware only gets you so far. Right. Business owners are by nature risk takers, right? That's why they started a business. So they're willing to accept some level of risk, but what they also are competitors. And so if you can talk to them about, let's talk about what your competitors do. Where do you win, right? How can technology help to be a competitive differentiator? I stood up at my dentist office the other day and asked him about his software that he used, because it's not the name that I always hear with all of the MSPs that I work with that work with all of these dentists. And his eyes lit up as he then took me on a tour around his office, showed me every gadget there was, but talked about the network and how his managed service providers made this connect to that. And this new piece of software meant I didn't have to have that pink goo shoved in my mouth for impressions anymore, where I would gag on it because of the technology. So he very much wants to talk to his managed service provider about ways technology can improve the end result for his clients, because he's not aiming to be just a surviving dentist. He's aiming to be the best in our area, and he's enthusiastic about it. So for sure, he's covered on the security, and he's already well established that he needs that as a baseline. But what he's excited to talk about is all the new and upcoming technologies that helps him drive a better business. So if you can get your client to talk about what drives their business and their business outcomes, you win. And they'll show up at the table. They want to have that conversation.
Right. I mean, who doesn't want to have that strategic conversation with subject matter experts? Because, you don't only have one client, so you can speak a lot of times to, and oftentimes MSPs do, focus in verticals. So if you're focusing on, you could say, oh, I have these 10 other dentists, and this is how they do these kinds of things. Yep. So, I mean, you mentioned the strategic conversation. Obviously, there are pieces of it that are, more reporting, right? Like, oh, we have, so talk about like what should be included in there. You mentioned competitors, but kind of give us a picture of, if I'm going to do this quarterly, bi-yearly, whatever, what kinds of pieces of information should be included in that report?
So first would be an executive summary around their business goals and objectives, right? Because everything's going to drive toward that. And because of that, their risk assessment, right? And how it might impact any of those goals, and recommendations that you would make to improve their risk posture, to improve their productivity, or any of the other business goals. And those recommendations should drive the budget forecast. So that's what we're going to talk about in a business review, but that's not the only reports that you have at the business review. The rest is like ancillary supporting documentation that you can refer to if you want. Every cybersecurity framework I've run into have said you have to have asset lifecycle management, you have to have user management. So those inventories are important to have. Literally no one wants to go through that list one at a time. But again, it's going to drive the budget, right? If you have information around customer satisfaction, if you have information around cybersecurity phishing training and what we can do to improve that, any of that supporting documentation should be included along the way. But the drivers of the conversation are their business goals and the risk assessment aligned to your best practices that drive the budget forecast and remediation plan.
You mentioned about the business goals. What if you are someone who, as you said, you just started solving people's problems and you're in there and you're just in the weeds, you're solving people's problems. And now I hear Marnie say, I have to start with the business goals, but hold on a second. I don't even know what the business goals of my customers are because I haven't asked them yet. So how do I get over that as an MSP to say, okay, yes, I realize I want to have these strategic conversations and I don't want to be embarrassed saying to my client, like, hey, I probably should have asked you what your business goals are. Yeah. How can they start those initial conversations?
So I've got 3 thoughts on that. First is check out their website, because their website may well say what their intent is, and you can infer some things for it or look at competitors' websites for them, right? So I can tell right away kind of how you're trying to differentiate yourself. That would be step 1. Step 2 would be to say, so you want to take it out of the fact that you haven't had the conversation with them yet, right? So I've been recently talking with some of my other clients about their goals for the next 18 months, because we've really been able to find ways to help make them more productive, save them a full-time employee, et cetera. So what are you thinking of doing for the next 18 months? So you're just bringing it as this just happened with other folks and here we are at the party now type of thing. And there's no question some imposter syndrome around how to have this conversation, because I'm no dentist and I don't pretend to play one on TV, right? But I'm going to go have a consultative conversation with a dentist. I highly recommend the book called Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. It's about how to be a consultant when it's not your primary job. You don't have to be the dentist, but you have to ask the right questions to get them talking. And a simple question of like, all right, we're going to send out a whirl on this one. And I'd love to hear, Kathryn, what is one thing you wish technology could do for you? Or what is one thing you do all day, every day that you hate doing? You might find you actually have some automation that you could use to solve that problem. But because you never thought to ask the question, to your point earlier, you didn't know it was a problem.
Right. And another good time often too, maybe if you bring a new team member on, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe you haven't had those conversations, but it's like, hey, I want to introduce you to Marnie, our new head of sales. And then you, Marnie, can take over that conversation and say, hey,
Yes.
now that I'm new, I'm sure you probably already had this discussion.
Yes.
Right, exactly. We can start from scratch. Because I do think that kind of that opening conversation, what was the name of that book again? I'll make sure we want to include it. Getting Naked?
Patrick Lencioni. You don't just want to do that.
I get probably getting naked many times, but anyways, there we have it. And there you have it. So, so we talked about the importance of the reviews, and you can decide, obviously, as you said, you put your clients in those different quadrants as to how often you have those conversations, who maybe you should start with at first. But also, you mentioned obviously your platform with Lifecycle Insights. I know, we don't want commercials here, but I think that it's important for MSPs to understand that this process can be automated. So talk a little bit about how you guys do that.
Yeah, so we start with a primary integration with either a PSA or an IT documentation platform. And we grab companies, contacts, and assets, because we're aiming to automate 3 things: that asset lifecycle management, the user inventory, which includes API lookups to Microsoft, and a budget forecast, right? So if we can automate those pieces, right, those are numbers that fall into slots quarter over quarter. You can do a lot of math with it. Then the other half of the house is the magic of the MSP. So the risk assessment piece is not automated. This is, I'm going to go do an inventory. I'm going to look over the environment and see what problems and risks they have. And then the important part is tying the two together. So to be able to say, red, 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 I'm going to solve this red with this recommendation that's going to land on the budget forecast is really the power of what automation can do for you.
Got it. Great. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of automation. Our business, I mean, we work really hard to maintain that, one-on-one, but at the same time, it is so helpful to have at least just that starting point, right? And then you fill in with your business objectives where you need to be and spend the time on the strategic conversation rather than the numbers, right?
Work on the business as opposed to in the business sometimes, right? And that's what business reviews help you do.
Well, and of course, I mentioned in the beginning that you are an invited channelWise expert, and I always like to find out too, what made you decide to accept the invite and become one of our experts in our community?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the sentence I just said. You are helping folks work on the business as opposed to just in the business, and that's a huge need in this industry, right? Because people do start out just solving problems, but they rarely have the time to step back and solve the problem that is within their business. The other piece that I think about with that is that, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, I talk with hundreds of MSPs every week about this very problem and how to grow their business, right? So I have stories of real live MSPs doing the work. And again, I scaled a company from 60 employees to 1,500 through customer success. So I've seen a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also obvious I'm pretty passionate about customer success in general, which always means like I've read all the books, right? You want to talk to me about customer success books and some ideas around that? I'll chat KPIs and customer success all day long.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I mean, and we're almost coming on to end of time. So I just want to see, do you have any final thoughts that our folks that are listening today can take away on the practical steps that MSPs can take to leverage that QBR, the business review, to enhance their business and their relationship with their customers?
I would say defeat the blank page or eat the elephant one bite at a time, whichever your favorite phrase is, but start somewhere and start now, because it is the place where you're going to differentiate your business with the human element. So start somewhere, and it doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate, right? So if you are going to start with an asset inventory, start with that. But by golly, have a conversation around business goals while you're there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Marnie, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. And if you'd like more advice on and how to help your clients and enhance your relationships with your clients through Lifecycle Insights or QBRs or business reviews, Marnie, of course, is an expert on the channelWise network, and we will put her link into the chat. And if you have other questions, of course, we have lots of other experts there as well, all ready to help you or your partners go farther, faster in their business. So thank you again, Marnie, for joining us today. And thanks everyone again. And until next time.